like helping is something that is actually pretty selfish for me. I would say they were all over the place, but I would say nobody of them was thinking about let's destroy the world. I actually see that in 20, 30 years, like 20, 30% better than today.
So welcome to this new episode of My Journey to Impact. Today we have Julian here, Julian Frede. We've actually never met in person so far, but we've met online in different situations and occasions. And I've come to really value Julian as a person who is true and deep about impact. And this is why he's here today. So we're exploring Julian's journey to impact. How did you arrive at a place where you could say, I want to do this with my life. I want to have positive impact. And how do you do it? Right? What is it that you do? So we can start slowly. We can ease in, where you can start early in life, because that's where these things usually begin, where the seed is planted. And we can meander our way into the here now and see what you do with that. So welcome, and thank you for being here. The stage is yours.
Thanks, Thomas. Thanks for having me. Very interesting that you're building these episodes on impact and how people start thinking about it. Yeah, you kind of briefed me in the beginning saying, really go into yourself and think about when did you start with impact. And I have to admit, there is no awakening situation on impact, but I think the whole journey of developing oneself towards this topic is one which I went more in a classical way, because my background, I would say, is more coming from volunteer work. I was engaged pretty early already as a child, and then as a very young adult in volunteer work in a youth hostel, and also, I don't know, bringing kids together for the summer holidays and in all this, what you normally do when you're active in a youth organization. And it's a bit that early on I kind of found out that like helping an old lady over the street or supporting a woman with a child wagon to get the stairs done is something that is actually pretty selfish for me, because afterwards I kind of celebrated half a day, and they are just like, thank you, great, it's amazing that you helped me, but then of course they don't celebrate you the half a day, but yourself, you feel so great. So I just found myself in a situation where like doing good is something like helping others, engaging with others.
And did you find that? Did you find that by accident, or did you? My guess would be that you were embedded in a situation or a family that did these things naturally as well, or did you find that for yourself?
No, it's naturally. It's also a bit historic, because my grandfather, he founded a care home. I think it's like a home for orphans. It's not really orphans, but more for children which did not find the care they deserved, so they were taken out of their normal families. He started that like really 40, almost 50 years ago, more by accident, because kids in the neighborhood were not treated well, so he took them in. And by this he started to develop it further and further. And so my mom already started to grow up with her four brothers and sisters in such a house where always 15 kids from other families lived in. My uncle took over this house. So I also, when we visited and when we met, we were all around these kids. And I think that is also something which burned a bit into my head, and which gave me also a trigger of not everything is always normal in your, like it is in your bubble. Yeah, like we, of course, were grown up in a safe family and so on, but like understanding that this is a present, I think also kind of nudged this idea more and more into my head, and especially also the behavior of my mom. Always saying, care about the others. Yeah, like just feel good when you help the others. That is definitely something which is based in, I would say, in most people I know. Yeah, it's yes, with me and my family, but with most people I know, it's for all of them. When they know they can help somebody, they just feel good. yeah, and this reflection, I think that is like volunteer work. I also love to support change, yeah, like do something different. So also kind of, I don't know, getting the typical curriculum of a volunteer work a bit differently done. So I don't know, now organizing a concert or a children parliament, or like really trying to really break up a bit the structures. That is also something I always thought it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of positive sentiment that I put in when I see, yeah, things like this going. And as I started it with 14, 15, also to get in some like more leading position in these organizational teams, it's also something great when you see you have a purpose. Yeah, and this time there was no impact or something in mind. Yeah, but it was more like you have a purpose, and you have volunteer work. And this is something where you see then teams fascinatingly working together and being motivated. And you also, if there are people who are not motivated, you cannot go to them and be strict or whatever, yeah, because then they just turn away and say, okay, thanks, I will not engage further. But it's a great form of working together. I think that is also something I very much liked on working under a certain purpose. Yeah. So impact is not like a topic which came in from the beginning, but I think it's more the social engagement. This idea of helping people is a bit selfish for me. Plus, working under a purpose is really bringing you towards great results, and this developed further. Sorry, you go.
And taking things into your hand, right? So you took that from your grandfather, who created this home, or this space for the children. So that's not a usual story, right? That's not the usual reaction of people to when they see that some kids in the neighborhood aren't treated well, that they just establish a place like that, right? So that's not very common. So I guess that this entrepreneurial spirit also is an important element in your history, right?
I don't know, because I also come from a family which values safety pretty high. So a lot of people also work as teachers in the administration and so on. So that is also part of the family story. But on the other side, even if you work in admin, or if you work in a structure which exists, and that's again like a saying, it's normally a German saying, so I try to translate it. My mom always says, everybody said it's not possible, you cannot do it. And then one came and just did it. Yeah, and this saying is kind of something I always heard. It's like, yeah, just do it, like try it out. Yeah, and not that you have to be entrepreneurial, but more just, if there's a problem, or like just try to solve it. And even in this time, it was for me not entrepreneurial at all. Of course, in a way it is. And this is the idea of problem solving and so on. Yeah, and it's linked to entrepreneurial behavior. Yeah. But there it was more like, even in a safe place, even in an existing structure, don't get the structure away and start your own business, but more be innovative wherever you are, yeah, and always try out new things.
That's how I use the term entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, me too, but I didn't know the term. Yeah,
a problem solver, and not necessarily to create a business, but to solve a problem. Yeah. Okay.
But again, in these times, neither impact nor entrepreneurial was a word I would have used for it. And I would still say it's just a step-by-step approach. I found this impact notion more coming in when I was in uni. So I studied, in school, I missed a bit the topic of general business, economics, and so on. So I thought about, okay, I think when I understood this, I can understand the world better, because I was super interested in history and politics. But I thought, okay, I have not learned everything, but I touched it in school. So the rest, I didn't know anything about economics yet. So I started with first year, actually with the business part, but then I jumped over to economics because I think I need the structure and system and so on. But in this time, I also started to volunteer for IESEC.
Yeah.
This is like an organization which is pretty simply helping people to get internships worldwide, or small jobs. But the purpose I had was bring peace to the world. And the idea was, how can we do it? We just try to bring people from different countries into different places, and it's easiest when they have a job there or something to do. So we provide internships worldwide. And that was the first time I actually got this, you know, of course, in church work, you have the belief and whatever, but there normally the work was not really linked to such a purpose, but more about helping the children. And there was no direct link of really like being part of church and doing it for God. But there was really like a higher goal, a purpose, which was really so explicit that at the beginning I thought it's ridiculous. Yeah, like, come on, you say world peace. Yeah, what the hell is that for a target when you do internship? Yeah, come on. But they're also leading my local committee and going to the larger conferences. I really started understanding why it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that you have a big target, yeah, a big objective to focus on, and then achieving it means you just have to go the small steps and you have to do what you can do. Yeah, and start somewhere.
Okay, that's interesting, because that creates tension, right? So I observe in many people that setting a very high goal, like shooting for the stars to reach the moon, basically, but that creates despair, because they start with the assumption, okay, I'm not going to reach the stars, and that therefore I'm not going to start. How do you solve that for yourself?
By natural optimism. No, but I think it's doable. The interesting thing is, I would not say, oh, we will now be able to breathe out of space because there's no oxygen, but we can breathe. But it's more about, we can probably live some time in outer space because we're going to build structures that we are able to still breathe out of the normal atmosphere. But these are like, what are the targets? Like, world peace is nothing which is not possible to reach. Yes, we're going to have setbacks all the time, and I think the current time is a super big setback. Yeah, and where you almost like, where I found a lot of despair also in these moments. But on the other side, that is something that is definitely achievable. It's nothing like a total utopia. And that's the same with a purpose, you know, like world peace, but then on the other side, when you have a certain impact in mind, or like I always put the hashtag way to paradise. Yeah, I think when you design an utopia in your head, and so you say it's world peace, it's an inclusive society, it's a decarbonized economy, I actually see that in 20, 30 years, like 20, 30% better than today. Like, you will, of course, never ever have, as a human society with some billions on the planet, only happiness everywhere. But I would not define paradise like that.
But we can. But so first of all, it's very interesting how you already accept something as non-utopian that many people would, for many people, it would appear totally utopian. Saying world peace, how is that possible? Will not be possible. We've all heard that over and over again. So what I'm curious about is how do you protect that mindset, right? How do you protect that the maybe for me, I call it protecting my naive perspective, so that I can stay optimistic towards big goals in the light of adversity. So how do you keep optimism in times of adversity?
I think there are different layers to it. I think one is I can also be somehow stubborn. But this is like just a type of character. But on the other two, I would say there's one part is more this emotional thing. You would say it's naive, but for me, it's always, I said, if you're going to be adult, you cannot deny that there's always a child inside you. So, and that's existing, yeah. It's in everybody, yeah. Once you have children, and then you see them playing in the sandbox, and then later you go to a management meeting, you know what I mean, yeah. It's in everybody, yeah. It's more like it's not a child, but it's like your natural being or whatever, yeah. So you cannot deny it, and there's something to it saying, actually, we are positive beings. Yeah. So there's like a more emotional touch to it, which I think everybody has. Once you were traveling, people will not send you away without, for example, having already bad experience on, but like naturally they open the door, like everybody, everywhere. Yeah. And the farer and the stranger, yeah, the more they open the doors. And on the other side, from me, it's also a bit logic and a system understanding. Like humanity is developing so fast in the last 200 years, 250 years. And yes, we are able to destroy ourselves, but we did not yet. And yes, we could still, but I think humanity is not it's not really trying to destroy itself, but there's like some tensions and whatever, and we still need to build a governance that we can really live on one planet. Mm-hmm. But when I look into history and the human development, how in general every individual is now able to, or more and more able to live its own life, mm-hmm. I would say in the next 200 years, it will just get better. And better means we have more opportunities, also more possibilities to discuss how we want to live. And that governance is also going to be, and politics is going to take that more into account, yeah, that you're going to have bigger blocks building, like the European Union, for example, yeah, where now people start to feel that as Europeans, and kind of national borders are a bit breaking up a bit. And it's all not a 1 year thing. It's all not a 5 year thing. Yeah? I think that's also something when I say logic, I wouldn't say it's deterministic. We can also fail, but it needs a lot of time to, of course, attain a utopia. And I don't think I'm gonna see it. Yeah, but I see actually the steps going towards it because a lot of people woke up. It's exactly the right path we're on.
Well, that's another interesting tangent, right? So setting a goal that's so far out that it's maybe relevant for your grandchildren or great-grandchildren, but not for yourself, and you're trying your best to move towards that.
Yeah, if I may just show that one, sorry, I don't make normally, but it's a Precipi or Precipice, yeah. Toby Ord wrote that, yeah. It's a book where you just say we are at certain turning points of humanity, and if you really want to focus on long-termism, we are at some. We will see some situations as humanity where we can risk the existence of the current civilization, but yet we passed some of them already. Let's see how future development is going, but on the very long-termism focus, it looks like the more we pass the situations where we could self-destruct the whole civilization, the more we're going to learn, and the more we will not do it again or not fall into the traps, and hopefully build a better governance. Yeah.
So I want to begin to tie back to where we were at the university, but I want to do that with a difficult question around how do you combine long-term thinking with the inherently short-term thinking that is generated by the economic system the way we have it organized right now.
I cannot link that to university.
No, because you were studying economics there. That's
no, I know,
but okay, yeah, okay. Now I get it. I was okay. No, why can't you link it to university?
I link it to economics at university because at university, but also afterwards, this is exactly a discussion which still drives me, and I think that is nothing you're going to solve per se now or tomorrow, and it's not solved yet. But for me, what I found out is I studied economics. I was really pushy for social and volunteer work. I went also to work in Africa in different situations, in development cooperation, either as an intern, as consultant. But then I also went back to uni again because the a lot what I saw on people who want to help was also misleading and not really helping the people on the ground. So it's a bit like I thought, okay, the economic system is probably a bit broke, and it's not really the solution. Yes, but then on the other side, I thought, okay, this helping is also not always the right way. So like, there's not the golden rule or the perfect way of changing people or changing states, or like there's no Washington consensus, or there's no other blueprint how societies can from now to then develop and have a certain stage of now we have the perfect paradise situation. That's not there. And it's definitely in my early 20s, I had this feeling more that, hey, there is actually the solution. There is, we and that's, it's not there. Yeah, it's more that it's really a super complex structure. And yes, you need engaged and motivated people, but you also need to think about what is human development, like really going back to this idea, what actually are we targeting here? Mm-hmm. And then thinking about what are the pathways which are the most promising ones. Okay. And that's actually why I went back. I said more, I need time for reading, but I did my PhD in this time, but I wanted more to read books and understand what others thought about it. Yeah,
that's a good excuse to do a PhD.
Yeah, it's actually that I actually told also the professor, like, yeah, I know I'm not really fitting to the chair, but we're also living here already, and I want to name the time somehow. I don't want to do a sabbatical now already. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I need also in the beginning, lectures I want to do, but I will not do research in the beginning, but first start reading very broadly. And yeah.
So what was your PhD about, and what did you read that you remember, and what is the most important findings you got from that time?
The most important findings were more coming from two things. The one was the lecture I built on development economics and development politics. And they're more the insight of discussing this with 115 students. And in the first lecture, I normally said, okay, great that everybody now sat down and stopped talking after 5 or 10 minutes. And then said, okay, let's go up again, everybody. And we go out again. So we went out again and then stood on a small hill and said, okay, what is development? And that the student, even in the early times, they just first laughed and they're like, what is he talking about? And then they're like, we have a university, so education. We have a street, so infrastructure. Boys and girls are standing here. Yeah, wow. Mm-hmm. Or there's nobody shooting from the bushes to us because we want to be educated. Yeah, and mm-hmm. There's nature around us. We can breathe air. So people really woke up and started defining what it is. Mm-hmm. So there is an initial idea in everybody about good, about development, about human development, and everybody is keen to discuss it. In the same lecture, we also discussed then what is the capital of Africa. And not everybody, like, there was really starting a discussion about this question, and I was really a bit freaking out on this topic, saying, hey, you want to go out and you want to support, and most of you want to go abroad, and you don't know that there are more than 50 countries in Africa, and there's no one capital. Yeah. So I took then more than 20 students down, and we made a project in Kenya with another university. So they met with the people, they understood the country, they smelled what you smell, they ate what you eat there. So so this is also like this grounding. And again, people understand development, then they often don't understand the technical details or like what's really going on. But then once you go down with them, they also get the touch point and have a feeling for it. So this was a lecture which really taught me a lot. So gave me back much more than I could give. Mm-hmm. And the other part was really reading Amartya Sen. It's just I'm a bit passionate about this guy. But yeah, development as freedom is actually a framework I can link myself pretty much to. Yeah, when he talks about this capability approach and that it's not it's very good to have economic development, but it's not a goal in itself. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's more about that the individuum has different capabilities and can decide itself if they want to explore it or not. I think this approach is just, for me, it's fascinating. It's pretty much the right response from me for the last 20 years on what is development and why should human development go into certain utopian situations. What is the purpose for human development? That is a bit, these two things were the major.
Nice. But before we go there, which is a very interesting tangent to explore, I'd like to explore something else, which is you took the students out, you asked them a basic question that everybody usually takes for granted. And then as they start thinking about it, they discover, wow, there's so much more to it. And I haven't never thought about this. So you were breaking a pattern. And by breaking that pattern, you were opening the mind of to new potential. So the pattern that you were breaking is assuming that everybody understands the same thing about a word.
Mm.
Yeah? And by doing that, you help them question things, be more critical about other words that they might assume that everybody is thinking the same thing. And what happened was that they were all carrying a lot of knowledge and information. If given the right environment, that could unfold. Right? And earlier you said that we have to think more systemic. That issues are of systemic nature. Do you see a link between that? So is the potential for critical thinking that is something that can be triggered very easily in humans? Is it similarly easy to trigger something that nurtures or becomes systemic thinking in humans as well? So is there a link in the way that can be done? I hope that question makes sense.
Yeah, when I understand it right, you kind of say the critical ideas about systemic thinking and I don't know, having a systematic approach and also having this idea and understanding of a complexity. Yeah. Plus putting these ideas also in an individual's mind, it is a need on the individual side to at least approach this idea of a complexity.
Exactly. And is it possible for the individual to learn how to deal with complexity of that kind? Because that seems to be an important thing to deal with the enormity of the opportunity and challenge we have at the
moment. Yes and no. Like my intention was not this bringing them the idea of complexity. Mm-hmm. I would say at university in general, but I think life even teaches you more this. Complexity is everywhere. It's just not named complexity. Yeah, but and also the understanding that in a complex system you have a certain role, but you're not the one in a logical structure building the whole system, and you are, like it's not that you are the big roboter who can just build the whole world and that's it. But in a complex system, you can try to tweak here or peek here and see how it's going, but you will never be the one who just builds the solution, because especially society is always giving you, of course, a response. Yeah, so it's not that you have, like we do often in economics, say a ceteris paribus, and you just do one effect and you see at the end what's coming out, but everything is on the move. Yeah, while you're doing it. So I think that is what most people have in mind. But what I did there was a bit different. It was more the idea what I found later at Gapminder. This website which also shows you when you talk about development, it's also a question: what is your level where you start from? Yeah, because people in developing countries, and especially the students, in the beginning, they were normally not aware that inner security is a super big element of development. Yeah, and that is like a foundation of it. Yeah, and health Yeah, because
Mm-hmm.
everybody there was, of course, healthy in this moment, staying together there only. And it needed a bit of time to understand that this basics, yeah, like gender, yeah, like equality and gender equality, yeah, that this is just a big foundation of how a society lives. And because if 50% cannot live out their freedom, that's 50%. It's not that this is then something where we would say it's developed. But this was more the idea to show we are not in a stage where everything is bad and we are in a dystopia, and we almost live in it's not for everybody everywhere, but it's a status quo which is developing further to the good. Yeah. When you see the development, and yes, it's always a fight. It's managing conflicts. It's it's not that everybody's happy all the time, but in general, to see how much is already reached and how the foundation was laid and what is necessary to keep other elements of development, what they probably would say, being part of society, being able to participate in culture, and like very different elements also which were relevant on development. They all are interconnected, but you cannot forget the basis and the fundamentals. Yeah.
And how does Gapminder play into this? You mentioned Gapminder.
No, Gapminder is just what I like, that they kind of bring you the SDGs. Yeah. So if you go on their website, you do a quiz and you can they ask you questions. Where do you think the world status quo is today? Yeah, on all the SDGs. And you often fail in the beginning because either you've seen the news and you are thinking it's a total disaster where we are at humanity, and partly you're pretty surprised when you're coming, for example, from Germany, how the whole world is on a development stage when you yourself are, of course, already feeling pretty comfortable with certain situations. Yeah, so if you're talking more about peace, conflict, and so on, either you feel already comfortable because you're here pretty safe, or you have just seen the news and you think the whole world is a disaster, but both is not true. Yeah, so kind of playing more about what is the reality today and how many people are actually really refugees and how many people are really living in countries with conflicts. And this is something I liked in Gapminder.
Okay, so Gapminder as a way to create a shared reality, because the problem, one of the problems at the moment is that if you don't watch the news like we used to, we had two news channels. Now we have a couple of billion news channels, one for each, and that is optimized towards our personal paranoia profile, and so we see a very skewed picture of the world.
Yeah.
So now with Gapminder, you can look at the actual data, and by the way, Hans Rosling, who initiated that, he was one of the most thoughtful and for sure one of the most funny statisticians in the world, so that's okay. That makes a lot of sense. So seeing the actual data and starting to make sense of that.
Yeah, it's like Our World in Data. And I think that is like Our World in Data is also one of the platforms where you would say they try to bring in worldwide data to give a more generalized picture. But what we've seen, and let's say in the Declaration of Human Rights, what is it now, 80 years ago, 90 years ago, 80 years ago, is something we see now more and more coming up, saying what are the different realities and how can you manage realities. And this is not about your Telegram channel and if you watch whatever news, but once you start discussing about something, you need a basis to say what is the status quo in a certain country. And then you normally see politicians and other decision makers coming back to data descriptions, but also then people who can help them understanding the realities. Yeah, and guiding them with this is, I would say, as relevant as this political frameworks, which are now building a big foundation of our acting worldwide.
But that's important. So it's not only data; it's also the narrative, right? Because we cannot integrate the Gapminder database and functionality in our thinking at all times, but we have to somehow find stories that help us navigate the world with much more ease than having a statistician by our side all the time, right? So and that ties back to your optimism about the utopian vision, right? That's the narrative that feeds the way you make decisions, in a way. And going back to that group of students, could you see that they were sharing a narrative? Did they hope for similar things in the future? Did they have a compass that was roughly pointed in the right direction, or were they all over the place in different directions?
I would say they were all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say nobody of them was thinking about let's destroy the world. Yeah. So, but because that's why we laugh now, because
mm-hmm.
we wouldn't expect anybody doing this.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, you're all over the place with regard to there's no single shared purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think one aspect on this is also individualism supports, of course, that there's no one single purpose. But on the other side, having shared values is something different. And I think that is something we started, what I saw more with the students, like they had more shared values. So like for them, it would be a total surprise if they would exclude, again, getting the gender in, or I don't know, somebody from different color, like that's not there yet or anymore. Yeah. Of course, there could be some implicit and educated aspects in the behavior of the people, but with regard to their values, they were not having that anymore. So like their values were already more and more going to be aligned, but purposes were all over the place. I think some were just thinking, let's study and then get rich. That's it. And end of story. Others thought I study now, but then let's see what I do. I have no clue. And some had already a purpose-driven way in mind. Yeah. Doesn't say that anybody of them had half a year the same. But they were still under formation and still changing. And that's what I think everybody is all the way of his life doing. Yeah, thinking about, is this purpose now right or wrong?
And how was that for you? So you did a PhD to explore more. As an excuse, you learned something from the students, from the books, and we talked, or you mentioned that you also learned through the literature about that deep alignment to purpose. So let's go there. How did that influence your thinking? How did that influence then your actions in the world?
Yeah, it's I think what I've also found is that purpose is often something that is then linked to this impact discussion, because this is the time when impact came up and the discussion about impact. So impact is, of course, two things. It's either like a measurement level. So with a classical input, output, outcome, impact level, you are just at the very end. So the target group you have in mind, do they have a long-term change, behavior change, which you can measure somehow? So that is like the impact level at the very end. So that is more like a technical discussion. But on the other side, impact in discussion is more linked to purpose. So it's more about what is good. Impact has always like this a positive effect socially or environmentally. Yeah. So this is more than linked to this overall purpose, what you have. So impact is always an aspect of the paradise or of the utopia you have in mind. So already like separating these two, I think is pretty helpful. Like for me, it wasn't this time helpful to say, hey, actually, it's two things. And then defining what impact is and seeing there's like two ways of getting this purpose impact part, like getting a grip on this purpose impact part, I also liked a lot. So seeing that there's, of course, a need to have a shared purpose, like the SDGs are at the moment, I would say, the leading framework, but that others also try to put their frameworks in. It's more it's more like a playing field where different frameworks compete against each other, not compete, but like are there, and people decide on following it or not. And you can also have this bottom-up approach on impact. Yeah. So what is your role? What can you do at the moment? And what can you then logically build as an impact, and is this what you want? Yeah, so like more this, is this really like the idea where you want to link on, or is it something else, but then you have to do something differently? Yeah, so more this idea of materiality of your actions, and do they follow a certain intention or not, and is this really leading in an efficient way to this intention, or can you change your way, can you change yourself? This is more like the bottom up aspect and not the top down aspect on this impact purpose discussion.
And did that thinking change something about your purpose? Because you talked about world peace as a guiding light. Did that change something? And if so, in what direction?
Yeah, like world peace was the guiding light in IESEC. I wouldn't say it's my guiding light. Yeah. This discussion did not really change it, but it structured it better and got a better understanding of, hey, how can we approach this whole discussion? Because I also thought, wow, in development cooperation, but also like a lot of problem solving companies, and also in the discussion, and this time more on sustainability, integrated this impact and purpose notion and this idea. So it helped me to understand a bit more why, for example, Washington Consensus was not like Washington Consensus as a blueprint how a country should develop. Yeah, this is like a framework that was given, for example, by the World Bank in former times to a lot of African states, yeah, which did not work out. But it was not a mal-intended thing. It was a very well-intended thing, but it was just the wrong way. Yeah, so it's also something about you can have a great purpose, but if you try to reach it, always be aware that you could be on a totally wrong path. Yeah. So again, talking about complexity and this.
Yeah. You have to monitor your unintended consequences, right? At least.
And also, like, don't be blinded by, oh, we want to reach world peace. Let's buy weapons to get world peace done. Yeah. And everybody who is against it, yeah, let's fire them to another planet. That's also then probably not the totally perfect direction at the very end. Yeah. Seeing the US discussions on weapons currently, I think that's not
it's usually very hard to describe one's utopian vision, but in broad strokes, can you give me a picture of what is the world in a couple of 100 years that you envision that is worth working for and doing things for right now?
That's a very personal question.
You don't have to answer, but it's helpful. It's helpful.
Yeah, like my vision is not world peace, but my vision is more love. So that is kind of the basic idea. I think is this positive sentiment between people, and this acting for somebody else, not for having or for wanting something back, except for that you know you do something good, and this is a super big payback. So this, either if you explain it biochemistry wise, or if you explain it by belief or whatever, but this aspect, to see this aspect trickled into the system from institutional aspects to how people interact with each other on the street, and keeping that in mind and working towards it, and ever optimizing the performance and under this word. Yeah.
Beautiful.
This is a bit what drives me, and this drives me a bit like since ever.
Beautiful. It reminds me of I just want to relay that story quickly of one of my I would call him a teacher, Bernard Lietaer, who was a very eminent person in the financial field. He was one of the architects of the introduction of the euro, and he used to be head of the central bank in Belgium. And he had this dream of setting up a central bank for complementary currencies that is based in dreams. And this sounds very abstract, but the way he implemented that once in Belgium, when the Belgian government called him to ask him whether he had a solution for a part of the city of Ghent that had a issue with illegal immigrants in one area of the city, where things were falling apart because nobody had a job, and
Mhm.
there's a downward spiral. How would he solve that? He went there, he asked the people for their dream. And the dream was to have a little piece of land to grow something. So he got a piece of land from the city, and he made it available through a token that you could earn by being nice to your neighbors, by cleaning the street, by putting flowers in the window, and similar things. And these are all could all be linked to expressions of love, right? So
Mhm.
he basically he came up with a token that is somehow backed by positivity, by love, and that turned around the neighborhood in next to nothing. And other cities in Belgium went on to copy that model successfully, right? So that's a for me not only story that happens about how what you just described as a one brush in the utopia is actually achievable here now.
Yeah, it's achievable. But again, what I also see in my utopia is that it's not perfect, because
Mm-hmm.
you will never have this steady state of everything is perfect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that is something also that I can definitely in myself agree to, that working towards something is also still part once you reach utopia. Yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
will not be a status where everybody just lies back and sits in paradise, and I don't know, the food is just flying into your mouth, and you just, because that is also something that people will not get happy with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but you're also not in a steady state, so you're not at the university anymore. At one point, you finished your PhD, and then what happened?
I actually did not finish my PhD, but before finishing it, I thought, hey, I like this combination of entrepreneurial ideas, private sector, and development.
Mm-hmm.
I went to speak with KfW DEG and the, in this time, head of strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to, as a PhD student, understand how do they do it, where are their limits, where are they failures, yeah. Because in this time I was also pretty critical on development cooperation per se. And I was actually fascinated how a DFI is acting with all its limitations, yeah, and trying to push entrepreneurship, especially in the global south, so in developing countries. And by chance, on the other side, also thought, hey, I like this critical thinking and this idea. So after the first discussion we had, and I was happy I had a suit on, my only one, they just said, hey, actually, that was the first talk. Let's do it in 2 weeks again, and then we could even think about that you start out working here. So yeah, I went while doing my PhD into the job at DG, working there on the strategy and especially development cooperation unit. Finishing my PhD this time then, and this was a bit like, of course, a tough year. But I thought it's a great possibility to directly start there. And if they really want me, that's already something I like. Yeah, and we built there from our impact is something about, let's do a study all 2 years, towards more really like managing it, trying to like measure it, manage it, and also integrate it into the processes, the normal processes of discussions on clearance and principles, on due diligence, and so on when you do investments in developing countries. It's also great because there you saw the triangle of sustainability, yeah. So economic, ecologic, and social. That there's win-win in it, but there's also conflicts in it, and then you always have to start managing conflict, yeah. And it's about people, but it's also about this situation of the triangle is not always happy with everything on all sides, yeah. And also understanding this and accepting it was also a great deal of. I stayed 8.5 years there. So,
wow, that's a long time.
A big applause for my department head, because I'm not the perfect one with authorities, but she just was an amazing person. Yeah.
No, but it's is a good sign. It's a sign that you had fun, and if you have fun and are aligned with your purpose, then you're actually having impact, right?
Yeah, and it's amazing people. Like also seeing then how people have impact, like not the impact team, like in this time it was called the development corporation or impact team. People are of course the ones who often have the only impact, but especially with financial institutions, you're often very far away from the actual impact, which is your targeted impact. Yeah, you can of course have yourself a role and a changing effect, and you support change, but then again, the investment managers are the ones who have to believe in this idea and also be committed to a certain change, and I don't know, integrate environmental and social risk measurement or gender-based finance, climate finance, like it's, yeah, and they have to work harder for that, and they do. Yeah, so they have even a higher impact, and then you see the entrepreneurs on the ground, and then the people working there on the ground, and so it's amazing to also see how complex it is, and that everybody just has to be committed to it, and then at the end it works. Yeah.
And I just wanted to go in that direction, the complexity of all of it, right? Taking all of these variables into account, the social dynamics on the ground, which are not easily, if at all, predictable, but also the sort of micro data, but also the macro information. And I'm wondering about a very specific thing that is on the top of my mind at the moment, and whether and how you would integrate that into your framework of a hopeful and optimistic future. So we are currently burning through 100 billion barrels of crude oil per year, or the equivalent in other hydrocarbons. And 1 barrel of oil equates to the human labor energy of 5 years. We have 500 billion energy workers working for us at an annual wage of, depending on the oil price, but somewhere between $20 to $40 per worker. That's very cheap. That's you couldn't even feed or house a slave at that rate, right? So that's the cheapest kind of slave we've ever had. Now that era is coming to an end, one way or the other. It's becoming much more expensive to mine for hydrocarbons. So up to a point where at one point we can be pretty sure that it becomes prohibitively expensive to mine for them. But even if that's not the only problem, there's the other problem of climate change induced by CO2 and other gases in the atmosphere that are linked to hydrocarbons. Okay, so that's going to stop. Now, our default go-to answer at the moment is that we replace that with renewable energy. But sources of renewable energy that are functioning at the moment, we simply don't have the minerals to scale that up to 19 terawatts. That is what we're using right now. So we can scale that up maybe to, if we're lucky, to half of it. But we will use a lot of additional energy from hydrocarbons in the process, because we have to rebuild a lot of infrastructure, because most of our infrastructure is built on liquid hydrocarbons. And if we have to replace that by, let's say, electricity, that means we have to change a lot of infrastructure. So if you put all of that together, there are two ways to think about this. One is we come up with a different way of organizing society, in which we use less energy, and we can actually pull it off for 8 billion people or 10. Or we come up with other sources of energy that that can be deployed quickly, cheaply, and without a lot of use of energy. So I'm asking that question because it's at a fundamental level of economic behavior, because for every bit or atom that we move around, we need energy. And that's moving bits and atoms is the function of economy. So how do you think about that in your model?
Like coming more from a neutral or a more objective perspective, more logically, I don't think that we're going to scale down, because this is something that is socially not possible. I would even say not possible. It's a bit deterministic to say that, but I would say it's really problematic to change the minds fast enough. Yes, there is something on the move and so on, but actually even everybody who is trying, pretending, wanting to live very sustainable, they still use 4 to 6 tons per year person, or then they still do 1 or 2 flights a year, or so it's there's, even with the people who say we should do something, it's not there. Yeah, so I don't see that. Yeah, and I also don't believe in that as a solution, because taking something away is very difficult, especially on a societal level. Yes, for individuals, you can rule it out, you can change rules and so on. So that is something that is then painful, but doable. But as a whole, I don't see humanity going a step back, because energy also brought a lot of very positive elements, or positive elements of human development. Not only comfort and we are now all in post-materialism, but it's not only about comfort, yeah. But it's also about being cold when it's hot outside and being warm when it's cold outside, and having a health infrastructure which is well, and so on and so on. Yeah, it's not only the Ryanair flight for 10 euros somewhere. Yeah. So I would say I'm more behind this. We change the economy with strong regulation to renewable energies, and in a way really deliver on that hope is technology changing fast enough to bring additional sources of energy and a change in the basic minerals needed for renewable energies. What we've seen, for example, in solar, yeah, where they're now developing solar panels on different materials, which hopefully will change in future to even more vastly available materials. Yeah, let's see what's possible with the ones which are all out there. Plus, what I see is that the circular economy is taken more and more in. If you, for example, look at Japan, how much they can recycle already, yeah, and they don't live in huts or whatever, or in the forest, yeah, but they have a super high technology economy, but they recycle so much already. So I think it's circular economy, it's a bit the belief in technological change, and I would say technological change is a bit the only thing which really have as a solution, because I doubt that society is able to change so rapidly to a sustainable manner, yeah, because also the forces against it are super strong, yeah, and well equipped. So it's I don't see that as like the solution to go to. There's like, of course, a combination you have to build on, yeah, but it's not that now we can just say, okay, let's get this interesting picture as actually with these slaves working, the energy slaves. But I think like let's try to find out how can we get the same level of energy or even more energy out of different and renewable sources. Yeah. Plus, let's bring this idea of, can we really live this way into our heads? There, I actually would not say it's so much about energy and materialism. I would say more it's about also changing minds on, for example, how we treat animals. Yeah. So it's there's more to it than more the notion on climate change, depending on that we use too much oil and coal.
Yeah, there's
sorry, no clear answer, but
no, but it's I can totally relate to it. I want to note 2 examples that go in that direction that I've come across recently. There's a experiment in Cambridge where researchers have developed a type size battery kind of thing that generates electric energy from water, algae, and sunlight. It sufficiently to run a microprocessor, right? So that sounds pretty amazing. And then in Australia, there's a project going on with plants called hyperaccumulators that you can optimize towards accumulating certain minerals from the ground. So you can actually harvest metals from plants.
Okay.
So you can directly turn sunlight into and carbon sequestration into metals, into raw material, and that is a way to reduce our energy use dramatically, and by that go into that direction that you just described. So there is already things happening in that direction, but so stepping out of that, you said 8.5 years at a bank. You're not there anymore. So your drive to explore new things was stronger. What happened? What are you doing?
My drive of exploring new things was stronger. That happened. Yeah, great time, great people. Yeah, like 500 people working there, and with everybody you want to have lunch. So working at KfW DEG, it was really, it's a bit also a cold golden cage, people say. Yeah, so it's also great to work there with regard to how do you feel. But on the other side, now being out, it's also really about this good feeling you had when working there. There's a purpose in the company, and the people working there are to a large extent people I like to hang around with. Yeah, so it's really something they built there, which has a great traction. Yeah, so still here, still big fan. But on the other side, already when working high, already when working for DEG, I started discussing with others, supporting others in thinking how can I get a grip on impact of sustainability. And it's not easily possible to build such a consultancy or whatever into a structure like the DEG, which has a totally different business model. So I was more keen to explore, is it not possible to get more billions people, possibilities in political power and so on, supported on this idea of what is impact versus sustainability. And I didn't want to build it next to my job because I'm a bit focused. So I cannot just do too much in the same time. So I just said, okay, let's jump. And I built the Evolutic Impact Advisory as a consultant company, supporting now very, very different client segments on these questions on what is impact. Also because impact is, of course, there when you think about how can you manage effects that you have as a purpose or intent, more on the really like, where's the step to start? How can I efficiently do it? How can I measure it? How can I manage it on the long time? Where are learning cycles? It's doable for philanthropic activists, yeah, or high net worth individuals who want to do philanthropic activities, but it's also possible for a local development bank or of course a DEG, a development finance institution. And in the middle, all these funds and so on. So once you talk about like money flows, that it's kind of everywhere. Yeah, when you think about the future and green economy, it needs to be everywhere because it will be part of everything. But then you also have, of course, research going on, which I love. Then working also with, I don't have yet a work stream with regulators, actually, that would be great, but with politicians, because there's also, of course, a big leverage. Yeah, once you work with them and you get their idea and they're thinking about, okay, well, how can I learn to get faster or easier or better measured information on the green economy and how to come there, that will also help. Yeah, so they're working with European Commission's Joint Research Center on some ideas. It's also amazing. Yeah, so it's.
Yeah, I just wanted to go there. The SFDR and the EU taxonomy about driving financial institutions towards green is a powerful instrument, and gives a lot of hope. So do you see something like that, or other instruments like that in your work? And how do the other actors respond to these kinds of instruments?
I think there was a paper in Nature. I forgot the title, exactly on this. Like, how can you really make change happen on a higher level? And yet it's either pushing social movements through the roof, yeah, or it's by regulation, because their society officially decides that something has to happen to the playing field where something is going on, yeah. So yeah, that's a big change. And I see EU taxonomy and the SFDR, yeah, sustainable finance disclosure regulation. I see it in many aspects of my work. Yeah, of course, not so much in the philanthropic area, but for example, now at the moment, assisting a real estate fund in getting an Article 9 fund done, and also the measurement right. And, they don't want to just build it for getting through, but they think about, okay, how can we then in future screen for new assets and be sure that they will not get stranded? Because for them, like, a lot of people understand that the EU taxonomy is more like, hey, that will be the future. So the market is going to split. And if you don't want to strand your assets, better to follow it now, or make it like, think about the transition path towards it, because it's not about having everything today, yeah, as a perfect EU taxonomy aligned investment, but you should at least be sure that it can be somehow changed towards a EU taxonomy aligned, or at least the understanding of a green economy aligned, so low carbon inclusive activity. Because if not, and if you don't see a pathway towards it, you're going to get stranded. Yeah. What I see Thomas here, the CEO of Haniel, is building that strong. Yeah. As he's always pushing the word Enkelfähigkeit in every discussion. And he really puts also the normal businesses to that situation. So for them, it's more like an internal taxonomy, I would even say. So the EU taxonomy is there as a regulation, but it also triggered this understanding that, hey, sustainability is something here to come, and this impact notion is something that's also going to stay, and it will be like a business fundamental. And for some, it is already a business fundamental. Yeah. So it's not only the regulation part, but it's also a bit of societal drive. But altogether, they now get a stronger and stronger force, yeah, of getting the whole economic system towards it. Because entrepreneurs are problem solvers. They are neither bad or good or whatever, but they solve societal problems, yeah. And they're gonna solve or work now on solving climate, yeah. So like, climate tech is going through the roof. Why? Because it's a super big problem, yeah, and people love solving problems, yeah, and they're all on it.
And with instruments like the SFDR, you can direct money to it much more easily, right? Because it's one thing to be a problem solver. It's another thing to have the resources to do your problem solving at scale. And if that doesn't look like it's going to be profitable, it becomes a lot harder to move money in that direction. So.
Yeah, and it's a bit also that even if you have a low regulation, like in the UK, lower regulation, like you partly have in UK or USA, it's still that politicians somehow show you as economy, the interpretation, hey, economy, you are a socioeconomic construct, yeah, so you're a social construct of how to solve, yeah, optimization problems, trading problems, and so on for the world, yeah. So economy is not something there, but it's just society, yeah, working with each other, and society wants to be there in 20 years or in 50 years, yeah. And then economy, of course, reacts to it, and yeah, regulation, from my perspective, EU taxonomy was not yet ruling out anything, but they just said, hey, here, you can see now, let's split the market. They are already on track, what we see in 20 or 50 years as normal. Yeah, it's like, it's necessary that we will be there. And it's kind of like the first big signal to everybody. That is a bit how we're going to split it. How the understanding of what is a sustainable economy is about, yeah? So you can still have buildings which using some carbon, but a carbon budget. Not every building has to be positive or neutral, yeah? But you have to have a low energy use, and especially a low emissions link to it. So at least you have to green leases or not be dependent too much on gas and so on and so on. So these discussions are interesting. And it also, I think, opens a bit the idea of once you're going to see more climate change happening, like really climate change happening, like now it started in Germany last year with the flood and other activities, which are totally normal already to countries around the equator. But when you see it happening more here, the regulation will not stop and saying, hey, let's split it a bit, but they're going to say, are we going to forbid the bad stuff in a while? Yeah. And then Schumpeter is staying next to you with a big stick and saying, yeah, that's a part I don't like anymore. And let's flower the rest. And we see already economy changing towards it. Yeah. Of course, not all the big pots yet, but you know, they started already to get a bit 1%, 2%, 3%. Yeah. And let's see how fast they're going to fall, like the big pots of money when you go for insurance businesses and other big asset holders. Yeah.
But that ties back to the question of shared reality. So you said this is led by society. If society is made up of 80 million different realities, then it's hard to really create a coherent picture for the regulator, for the politician, to set up the instruments that then direct the economy. Now, one catalyst for creating a shared reality is, as you said, catastrophic events. And do you see society having discourse that is coherent and evolving fast enough so that we can move the regulations so quick that we can avoid disasters? Or do we have to experience disaster first?
Climate adaptation is something that is totally underrepresented in the discussions, I think, because we are not fast enough, and we are by far not fast enough. Yeah, so we're gonna see the disasters. Yeah, and it will be much worse. But the thing is also, we don't have the minds yet that says, hey, actually we're not in the super safe place anymore, and we have to prepare a bit about ourselves, our houses, our also a style of living, our idea of, oh yeah, there's a storm, but I'm gonna still travel. You know, like we are so used to, we are governing the world because actually nothing bad really happens here in middle Europe. Yeah, it's not there in the minds yet. Yeah. So I would say it's really also about adaptation, where adaptation is possible, but then also helping the ones who are not able to adapt fast enough. So also the question of, are we still open for refugees, for example? Yeah, we're going to see a lot of climate refugees. How do we deal with this? Let's start discussing it now, and not in 10 years when it's again then knocking on the door. And then you cannot say let them out, yeah, because it's too many. And you can also not decide on let them all in without thinking about it. Like you need to prepare. It's the same with pandemic. Yeah, like just prepare for it. And there were preparations, but don't stop thinking about it when it's not there. It's difficult, especially difficult in this time where politics are so busy with daily super high priority topics. Yeah, you cannot just say, hey, you also have to think about 10 other topics. Yeah, it's difficult, and I don't. I actually admire more and more the work they do, because it's something I wouldn't be able to do. Like often it's also people like just say, oh, politicians are, but it's so difficult, the job they're doing. Wow. And yes, they probably are not always right, and they're not always the best prepared and so on, but they do the job. Yeah, they do it. If you can do it better, be a politician then.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
But it's really about like, we are too late. We need to adapt. And yes, that doesn't mean we shouldn't say, okay, we're late, let's stop acting. Let's stop acting to mitigate climate change. But yeah, we also don't adapt. So at the moment, we don't do both. Yeah, and that's what I think is even worse. At least do both things as much as you can, even if we are too slow. Yeah.
So where's your optimism in this then? So if you could implant one concept in the world that everybody understands immediately, like when you like a worldview or world perspective changing concept. Like when you start to learn how to read, it's a very distinct moment, and it's like somebody activates an additional layer of reality, and suddenly you see all of this text. It was there before, you just couldn't see it because you didn't know what to make of it. Now you can suddenly see it. And so if you could think of a concept that if everyone had it, like reading, that you would want to give everybody to change their world view so that we become faster, what could that be?
This is also something I think what we need, like what everybody of us needs, what I don't need to have, but everybody would need to have. Yeah. I think it's a bit, it's understanding that we sometimes also have to step down or have to give in something, yeah, for the longer good, which is a bit like you have to invest now and get it back in 5 or 10 years, which is now for many people normal, yeah, and this was like 400 years ago, absolutely not thinkable. And this idea, I think this was it the Spanish against the Dutch fighting a war in this time, and the Dutch, I think the Dutch said, okay, let's push for the future. We are the higher economic power, and yeah, bet for it. So they got all the money in to then actually win the war at the end. And in Spain, everybody was like, okay, that's just not, what is that for an idea? Yeah, and it really triggered in the people saying, hey, we can actually bet for the future. And I think that is a bit also this thing saying, can we not give in something and step down our own, and not like living in huts, as I said, yeah, but how much do we have to give in? Also with like country positions, regional positions, yeah. How much do we have to change our positions? Yeah, where can we, for example, also give something what we think is okay, not super relevant, but okay, and for the other it's super relevant, or for the activities is super relevant. So like not being so stubborn on some positions. I think that is something I see as relevant. It's a bit linked to this long-termism thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say
like to give in all your today to the future. I think that's also wrong. But a bit more of it would be nice. Yeah, and a bit less individualism and performance and perfect optimism of the individuum today. That I think would be great.
So discounting the presence in favor for the future a little bit. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense, and I totally agree with that. Yeah.
And difficult for everybody.
It's very difficult. Yeah.
Myself definitely not last. Yeah.
But usually, if you've gone through some experience like that in your life, and I like using time at university as an example, where you know you don't have a lot of money, but you see the end. The end is in sight, right? So you know why you're doing this. You're going through something for a while, and I actually, there is an interesting implementation of an idea like that in Wales. It's called the Future Generation Wellbeing Act. So the Welsh people came up with an idea about what is a good Wales in 50 years or something. And there's an independent commission with a veto right on each policy decision, if it is not in line with that vision, with that utopia. Yeah. That's powerful, right?
Yeah.
And if we did something like that on an EU level, after having run that experiment in Wales, this could change a lot in a very short amount of time.
But then also you should have 2 chambers, and 1 chamber should be filled in parliament.
Absolutely. Yes, I fully agree. Fully agree. Because that's who we're doing this for, right?
Yeah. Great.
Thank you so much so much for your time. It was very, very inspiring. I learned a lot. And I look forward to our next conversation.